The annual Thompson family reunion invitation lay quietly on my desk, morning sunlight streaming through the thick glass of my penthouse windows, making the gold-embossed letters shimmer against the ivory paper. 14 years of keeping a secret I thought unshakable, and now it was about to unravel, not by my choice, but because of a single headline that had touched the mask I'd worked so hard to maintain. I picked up my phone and opened the email that had brought everything to light. Forbes Women to Watch. Olivia Thompson, the new face of AI and digital art, leading her company to a $2,700,000,000 valuation. The article would go live Monday morning, just 2 days before the reunion, and with each word, the shell of the eccentric artist sister would dissolve. "Thompson, your brother is calling again," Amanda, my assistant, said through the intercom. "I know," I sighed. Of course Daniel would call. He'd been calling nonstop since the article leaked to the major outlets. I hit the accept button, still leaning back in my chair, eyes on the Chicago skyline. "Olivia, what the heck is going on?" Daniel snapped, skipping any pleasantries. "Bloomberg just asked me how it feels to have a billionaire sister I didn't know existed. Care to explain?" I stifled a smile. "You'll find out Monday, like everyone else." "Are you kidding me?" He was nearly shouting. "Mom and Dad worry about you every single day. Everyone thinks you're broke, borrowing money, barely getting by. They thought you missed your shot, made all the wrong choices." "Worried?" I laughed softly. "You call the criticism, the sarcasm, the lectures about wasting my future worry? You know they just want what's best for you." "No, Daniel. They want me to be like you. Get an MBA, work for Dad's company, live a safe, manageable life." Silence stretched across the line. "Daniel, the golden boy, the heir, the walking embodiment of expectations." Finally, he asked quietly, "How long have you been hiding this?" I stood and walked to the window, watching my private helicopter land on the building across the street. "Remember when I moved into that rundown studio on the west side? When you first started that digital art thing? Yeah, that was 14 years ago." Exactly. Everyone thought I was chasing dreams, throwing away my Stanford econ degree. But no one knew I'd already sold my first collection, made 30 grand. "What?" Daniel choked out. 6 months later, I sold a series of AI-generated works, earned $120,000. The next year, $900,000. And while Dad was telling the family at Christmas dinner that I was stubbornly unemployed, I'd just passed my first million. Daniel was silent, but I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "But you still took money from Mom and Dad for rent. You drove that beat-up Civic for nearly a decade." "I didn't take money. I offered them an investment. They declined. I lived that way because I chose to, not because I had to. Staying low-key was the best way to keep the family at a safe distance." "A helicopter?" Daniel's voice cracked. "I have 3, and my company is currently valued around $2,700,000,000. But factoring in the support platforms, it's closer to $3.50. Daniel sucked in a breath like he couldn't quite catch it. "And now, if you'll excuse me," I said, reaching to end the call, "I have an executive board meeting to prepare for. See you at the reunion, brother." I hung up before he could reply and pressed the intercom again. "Amanda, is everything ready for the reunion?" "Yes, Ms. Thompson. The plane is prepped. Transportation will be via Bentley as requested. The resort has been secured as a private venue. All documents have been printed for each attendee." "Excellent." I picked up the invitation and looked at it once more. They had seen me as a dreamer, a burden, but this time, I would be the one telling the story, and I would make sure they never forgot it. I still remember that winter night when I was 23, the whole family gathered around the dinner table in my parents' old Vermont cabin. Outside, snow was falling heavily, but the air inside was colder than the temperature outside. Dad sat at the head of the table, wineglass in hand, his expression stern like he was attending a board meeting, not a family dinner. "Olivia," he said, voice low and firm. "It's time you got serious about your future. You need to give up that computer art nonsense and come work at the company." I was still wearing a paint-stained sweater, fresh from the studio. "I am serious, Dad. I just finished a project for a tech firm in Seattle. They paid me just to use the algorithm I designed to generate images." He raised his hand to cut me off, like everything I had to say was meaningless noise. "No one pays real money for computer-generated pictures. It's a fad. You can't live on a fantasy forever." Mom sat beside him, eyes full of pity. She gently patted my shoulder as if trying to console me. "Your father just wants what's best for you, sweetheart. You have an honors degree in economics. People would kill for that. Why waste it on something so uncertain?" I turned to look at my sister, Madison, 29, the family's rising star. Freshly promoted to deputy CFO at a major corporation, she flaunted her new Hermes bag right at the table. Madison smirked, eyes on her wine. "You're just scared of living real life. Every time I send you money to cover your electric bill, I feel like I'm donating to charity." The whole table laughed. Their laughter rang in my ears like a cruel soundtrack I never wanted to hear again. That night, I excused myself early and went upstairs to the old bedroom, with its faded floral rug and walls still plastered with my high school awards. I opened my laptop and quietly stared at the lines of code I'd written the day before, watching the art evolve with the algorithm. No one in my family knew that just 2 weeks earlier, a European firm had paid me over $40,000 to use my image generation software in their media campaign. I told no one, not a word. It wasn't the first time I'd been dismissed. When I was 26, I asked Dad to invest $150,000 so I could launch an AI-based art-on-demand platform. I had a detailed business plan, a working prototype, and a list of potential clients. He skimmed it for 5 minutes, then folded it shut and set it down. "Our company doesn't invest in illusions. Come back when you want to open a coffee shop or accounting firm." Madison just shook her head. "You can always work for me. I'll pay you a steady salary. No more dreaming." I turned them both down. That same year, I moved to Austin and started a journey no one in my family truly believed was real. They called me the creative oddball, the artist who never grew up, and sometimes the reclusive disappointment of the Thompson family. Every reunion was the same. They talked about interest rates, real estate, investment funds, and tangible wins. I sat at the end of the table, occasionally asked, "So, what are you doing now?" followed by polite nods and a quick change of subject. Last year, Madison stood up in the middle of dinner, pulled out a thick envelope, and handed it to me in front of everyone. "I know you hate asking for loans, so just take this. Think of it as a gift from your successful little sister." I smiled, thanked her, and slipped the envelope into my purse. After the meal, I left it unopened on the table and walked out. At that moment, my wallet held the black card of my own company, the one processing nearly $100 million in transactions every month. They didn't know, and I wasn't ready for them to know. Every condescending word, every smirk, every time they gave me money thinking they were being charitable. I remembered it all. Not for revenge, but to build something so solid that one day, they wouldn't be able to believe they once thought I was a failure. And now, that day is almost here. I moved into a shabby East Austin loft at the start of my 27th year. It was only 400 square feet, with no central heating and a bathroom the size of a shoebox. Every morning, I boiled water with an electric kettle to make coffee and showered under a tiny, leaky nozzle. But I had never felt more alive. No one in my family knew that while I was eating instant noodles and wearing worn-out sweaters, I had just completed a $75,000 contract with a Swedish gaming company to provide algorithms that generated animated backgrounds based on user emotions. The project was coded under an alias through a third-party firm, because I still didn't want the name Olivia Thompson appearing on any headline. My first real success came from a personal project called Echoes of Light, a digital art collection created by combining machine learning and visual memory data from thousands of survey participants. I sold the entire collection as exclusive digital assets through a private exchange. Final price, $48,000. When I saw that number hit my account for the first time, I cried. Not because of the money, but because it was the first time my dream had been validated by the world. 6 months later, I released my second collection, Synthetic Reverie. This time, I collaborated with a music producer so that each piece became a synchronized fusion of image and sound, a painting that could hum. The entire collection sold out in under 12 hours, bringing in over $220,000. I didn't use that money to upgrade my lifestyle. I used it to hire a team of software engineers to build my own platform, Lumina Frame, a digital space where artists could use AI to create works based on personal emotion and style. Each user would be assigned a personalized algorithm, and all artworks could be tokenized, traded, or displayed in virtual galleries of their own design. I didn't rush to promote the platform. I wanted it to be perfect before going public. For the next 2 years, I lived like an ordinary person, even below average. I still drove the 2008 Civic I'd bought for $1,200. The passenger seat leaned to the left, the radio only picked up 2 stations, and the driver's side window was jammed. But I still drove it to every family gathering, where Madison never failed to mention she'd just upgraded to the latest Tesla Model S. I still accepted Mom's pitying hugs, Dad's sympathetic glances, and relatives' generous offers. If you need a place to stay, we've got a guest house out back. Want me to refer you to HR at my company? They're hiring a communications assistant. I smiled, thanked them, and kept pretending to be the dreamy older sister who hadn't quite grown up. Meanwhile, I had opened a company in Delaware under a different name to handle financial operations. Each transaction was split and routed through 3 secure platforms to remain untraceable. The Lumina Frame project received funding from a venture capital firm in Singapore, whose representative had no idea I was the one behind it. They only knew me by the alias L. Vance, the creator of an AI tool already in use at major animation studios across Asia. By the time I turned 31, the platform was valued at $780 million in a Series B funding round. But I didn't share that with anyone in my family. I still lived in the same old apartment, just swapped in new curtains and bought a better espresso machine. The reason was simple. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to hear Dad say I got lucky. I wasn't ready for Madison to see me as a threat instead of the quirky artist sister she liked to help. And I wasn't ready to hear Mom worry that I was isolating myself too much. I wanted the truth, when revealed, to be undeniable. No excuses, no justifications, no pretending they didn't know or that I never told them. I wanted it to be so big, so real that no one could twist it or take it away. I wanted them to see. And that moment, the one where the entire Thompson family would have to face who I really was closer than ever. The article dropped just as the sun came up. On Forbes' homepage, front and center, the bold headline read, Olivia Thompson and the Quiet Rise of a $3,200,000,000 AI Empire. The photo I chose showed me standing in the main gallery of Lumina Frame, with the platform's highest seller piece priced at $4,500,000. Behind me, within 10 minutes, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, emails, calls, meeting requests, interview invites, partnership offers, a flood with no end in sight. I took a sip of espresso, my gaze calm as I watched the chaos unfold across the 3 monitors on my desk. The family group chat, muted for 5 years, had exploded. Madison, holy crap, Olivia, is this real? Daniel, this article's garbage. Gotta be some mistake. Mom, Olivia, I need to talk to you. Call me immediately. Dad, we need to talk. Alone. Before the reunion. I put the phone down, responding to none of them. It was time they felt what it was like to be left behind, just like they left me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the Chicago skyline through the glass, morning light dancing across the cold steel towers. Every building was a reminder. I had chosen the right path. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Amanda walked into the office, looking slightly flustered. Miss Thompson, there's a woman downstairs claiming to be your mother. Doesn't want to leave. I sighed and nodded. Send her up. 10 minutes later, the private elevator opened and my mother, Ann Thompson, stepped in. Her hair was still neatly styled, her beige Chanel suit crisp without a single wrinkle, but the panic and confusion in her eyes nearly made me not recognize the woman who once remained composed in every situation. Her eyes swept over the penthouse, the ebony floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, and landed on the gently shifting digital artwork on the far wall. One of my creations, currently valued at over $500,000. Olivia, she stammered. What is this? Is this your home? I walked over to the table and poured her a cup of tea. It's mine. One of 3 I own in Chicago. I've got 2 more in Manhattan and Vancouver, but I rarely use them. She dropped into the Italian leather chair across from me, eyes fixed on mine. You? What have you been doing? All these years, I thought you were scraping by selling a few paintings. I know what you thought, I cut in, my voice calm but sharp like a razor. I know everyone thought I was the failed older sister, drifting around with a laptop and a pipe dream. While Madison was climbing the finance ladder and Daniel was flipping properties, I was the family's cautionary tale. Mom looked down. I quietly opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, placing it in front of her. This is the investment proposal I gave Dad 6 years ago. I asked him to put in $200,000 to develop Lumina Frame. He said no, called me an unnecessary risk. That investment would be worth about $94 million today. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Growth charts, funding contracts, strategic client lists, everything laid out clearly. She gasped. Your father, he said you were just asking for money. Why did you hide all this? Why didn't you tell me? I met her gaze, not looking away for once. Because no one ever really wanted to listen. Every time I started talking about the project, you changed the subject. Every time I mentioned AI, Dad said I was lost in a fantasy. Madison gave me money like she was doing a favor. Daniel offered me a junior accountant job like he was rescuing me from ruin. A silence so thick it pressed on the walls filled the room. My mother looked up, eyes glossy with tears. You're right. I didn't listen. I looked, but I didn't see. I nodded gently. But now everything's different. The family will see, every single one of them. I stepped out onto the balcony where my private jet was visible from the nearby hangar. My name was painted across its side in metallic gold, glittering in the sunlight. The reunion was less than 48 hours away, and this time, I wouldn't be sitting silently at the end of the table. I would be the one walking in, and no one would be able to look away. On the morning of the Thompson family reunion, the sky was a flawless blue, as if the universe itself were setting the stage for a reckoning no one would forget. I stood on the main deck of the 3-story yacht named Vera, anchored off Montclair Island. The private island I had purchased nearly a year ago, just weeks after closing my first billion-dollar deal. In the distance, 4 helicopters touched down one by one at the landing pad, where a giant "Welcome to O. Thompson Retreat" was etched in white stone, sparkling in the tropical sun. Each pad was flanked by massive LED screens playing a loop of digital works I'd created, including Synthetic Reverie, The Memory Orchard, and Code of Solace. The same works my father once dismissed with a wave when I proposed an investment partnership. I adjusted the collar of my white silk blouse, eyes fixed on the line of Rolls-Royce Phantoms waiting along the marble path leading to the central villa compound. Each car had been individually assigned to transport family members from the airport to the harbor, then onto the yacht or helicopter, according to the schedule. The first helicopter landed. The door opened, and out stepped my father, Richard Thompson. Still dignified as ever, though this time his eyes wavered just slightly. Beside him, my mother, Anne, had a tight expression, as if willing herself to believe none of this could possibly be real. The second helicopter carried Madison and her husband, Carter, both dressed in designer labels from head to toe. Madison stepped down, glancing around, her face stiffening as her gaze landed on the sign engraved with my name. She couldn't have imagined that the reunion she once suggested be held at a resort in Scottsdale was now happening on an island owned by the sister she used to call a family responsibility. I stepped down from the yacht deck, hands in my pockets, my smile subtle but sharp as a blade. "Welcome, everyone," I said, my voice ringing clearly through the open air. "Hope your trip was comfortable." My father stepped forward first, trying to keep his tone even. "Olivia, all of this, was this really necessary?" I tilted my head, lips curving. "Depends on how you define necessary, Dad. After 10 years of reunions at forgettable hotels, I figured it was time we had a different kind of experience." "Different," Madison echoed, eyes wide as she looked at the glass-clad villas tucked behind rows of palm trees. "You own an island?" "Technically it's a compound, but yes, the island is central." I smiled. "Everyone ready for the reunion?" No one responded. I gestured, and immediately the fleet of phantoms began gliding forward, carrying each group to their assigned private villas according to a layout I had personally designed. Every room bore a glowing acrylic plaque with the occupant's name, and inside was a customized welcome packet. I followed along the path, sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across the stone. As we reached the main hall, uniformed staff stood in formation, holding chilled fruit mocktails. All beverages adjusted to meet health standards and suitable for every age group. "Dinner will be served at 7, I turned to the family. "Until then, you're welcome to rest or visit the East Wing exhibit. It's featuring a few new pieces I've never shown before, and if you look closely, each section has a small LED display showing the current value of each artwork in real time." My father squinted. "Like a museum?" "Not quite. More like a museum, but blockchain connected and by invitation only." Madison turned to Carter, whispering something I couldn't catch, but I saw her expression, a mixture of jealousy, shock, and doubt. Some part of her was trying to understand how the eccentric older sister she once pitied had managed to build a whole kingdom right under their noses. I stood still for a moment, watching them scatter across the retreat. Each of them wore a look of confusion, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding them. And I was just getting started. Tonight, as they sat around the long dining table beneath the crystal dome, I would show them more than numbers and art. I would show them exactly what they had missed for the past 10 years. And this time, I wouldn't be speaking softly or sitting invisibly at the far end of the table. I would be standing at the center, and they would be forced to face the truth they once refused to see. I built an empire while they were busy feeling sorry for me. Warm golden light poured over the long table, draped in white silk, inside a glass-paneled hall overlooking the sparkling night sea. Each seat was marked with a name card and an ivory envelope. Crystal glasses caught the light like tiny stars. The staff stood silently on both sides, dressed in sleek black and white, awaiting instructions. The Thompsons shuffled in, still uneasy in their steps. No one spoke. Each had already opened the envelope left in their private suite earlier, and I knew they were still reeling. Inside each envelope, I had prepared something unique. Madison received a chart comparing her much-touted 6-figure salary to the passive income I earned daily from my investments. Daniel got a report detailing how his real estate firm had once declined a partnership with Lumina Frame 4 years ago, and how that deal, if accepted, would now yield triple their annual revenue. My father, Richard, was handed a portfolio titled in italics, "The Missed Investment, $200,000 to $96 million." I stood once everyone had taken their seats. My eyes moved slowly across each face, tense, uncertain, cautious. A few avoided eye contact. Madison fiddled with her napkin. My mother sat straighter than usual, trying to appear composed. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice soft but firm. "Before dinner, there's something I'd like to share." I pressed a button on a small remote hidden in my pocket. The lights dimmed. The glass wall behind the table transformed into a transparent screen, and a title appeared: The Forgotten Journey and the Opportunities Left Behind. The first image showed me at age 24, sitting in a tiny apartment, an old laptop on my lap. Text read, 2013, called The Kid Who Never Grew Up. First collection sold, $48,000. I slowly walked along the table, my gaze fixed on the screen. Next slide, me standing at a whiteboard presenting the Lumina frame pitch in 2016. Below was a quote from my father. You think people will pay for images made by computers? That's not art, it's a delusion. Then came the growth chart, every milestone paired with a familiar remark. 2018, Madison. You can't live off inspiration and instant noodles forever. 2020, Daniel. Who needs images when people are investing in real property? 2022. Mom, why don't you teach art? Like you used to love drawing. It's more stable. The lights returned. I stood still at the head of the table, the air heavier than concrete. Why did you hide it? My father asked, voice low. Why not say anything all this time? I looked at him. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. Because no one was listening. I tried. Every time I spoke up, you changed the subject. Every time I proposed something, I got a smirk. Every time I talked about AI or digital art or anything beyond your definition of success, I was dismissed. I turned my gaze to Madison. Do you remember the time you shoved that envelope at me in front of the whole family and said, just take it? I got you? Did it ever cross your mind that maybe I didn't need help? Just respect? Madison didn't answer. She bowed her head, fingers tightening around her glass. I'm not sharing this to brag, I continued, but to help everyone understand that success doesn't always look familiar. You don't have to follow a path the family carved out to be accomplished, and silence doesn't always mean failure. My mother blinked, her voice barely a whisper. We were wrong. I was wrong. I didn't realize how far you'd come. I smiled gently. I don't need your apology. I just need you to see me. Really see me. Not the version you hoped I'd become. I raised my glass, the light refracting into 100 tiny stars. And now, I said, let's eat. But this time, no one has to pretend to be someone they're not. No one has to shrink under judgment. We sit here as a family, and I am Olivia Thompson, once forgotten, now at the head of the table. Everyone was silent for a long moment. Then Daniel slowly raised his glass. To Olivia, he said, and to the biggest lesson you've just taught all of us. One by one, they lifted their glasses. In the golden glow of the wine, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. True recognition. After dinner, once everyone had returned to their rooms, I stayed behind in the glass atrium, sitting on a soft leather armchair, a cup of herbal tea in my hand. The sea outside rolled with gentle waves, the moonlight stretching across the water like a silver ribbon. I sat there for a long time, savoring the first moment of calm after a day full of reckoning. No one called me delusional, no more pitying looks, no more comments that treated me like a problem to be fixed. For the first time in 10 years, I was seen, not explained away or dismissed. Footsteps echoed softly. It was my father. Richard? Still wearing the same white shirt from dinner, now without his tie. He sat in the chair across from me, watching me quietly for a long time before speaking. You did something none of us ever imagined, and that makes me both ashamed and proud. I didn't respond. I just tilted my head to listen. I always thought I was right that stability was the goal, that creativity should be a hobby, not a career. But now, it's clear who was really looking in the wrong direction. I set my tea down. You weren't wrong for choosing the safe path for yourself. You were wrong for thinking it was the only path for everyone. He nodded, his gaze resting on the Code of Solace piece gently shifting on the wall. your mother and I, we never understood the language you use to express yourself. So we were afraid. And when people are afraid, they deny. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it on the table. I was going to leave this in your room, but I figured it should come from me directly. I opened it, his handwriting, unmistakable. Olivia, if I could go back, I wouldn't make you choose between your family and your dream. I missed the chance to invest in a project, but worse, I missed the chance to walk that journey with you. I'm sorry. Not just for doubting you, but for not listening when you needed it most. You're not just successful, you've created a new world. And for the first time, I'm proud to be called the father of Olivia Thompson. I folded the letter slowly, holding it in my hands. Part of me had waited for this moment so long, I'd nearly convinced myself it would never come. But strangely, when it finally did, I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I just felt at peace. The next morning, the entire family gathered in the main auditorium, where I would present my latest project. On a simple stage with a dark backdrop, I stepped forward in a navy blue jumpsuit, the lights softly focused, creating an atmosphere of quiet anticipation. Thank you all for staying, I began. Today I want to introduce the next step in this journey. A whole new chapter. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up with the logo, Ethereum. Below it, a platform to rewrite reality. Ethereum is a project I've nurtured over the past 3 years. It's not just a digital art platform, it's a hybrid space where augmented reality, personalized AI, and secured blockchain converge. A place where anyone can create, own, and live inside their own creative environment. A world not limited by canvas, stage, or screen. I played demo clips, from a young girl building a virtual library of her grandparents' memories, to an architect designing a real-time interactive model of his vision inside a mixed reality environment. This project has completed its Series C funding round, with a valuation of over $10 billion. And today, you are the first to see its full potential. The room was completely silent. Daniel spoke first. Olivia, if you're open to it, I'd like to move part of my personal investment portfolio into Ethereum. Not because you're my sister, but because this is genuinely valuable. Madison slowly stood. I'm not sure I understand all the technical stuff, but I know when something is changing the world, and if there's anything I can do to support it, I will. I smiled. I didn't need their redemption. I didn't need them to prove anything. But those words, they meant more than any check. That evening, I returned alone to the small villa tucked on the west side of the island. The sea breeze drifted softly through the open curtains. I placed my father's letter next to a framed copy of the first NFT sale I ever made, priced at $48,000. On the nightstand, I added a new frame, the Forbes headline, my photo standing before Lumina frame, and a small line beneath it. I didn't do this to prove anyone wrong. I did it to stay true to what I believed was right. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Soft light from the sea spilled through the wide glass windows, casting golden patches across the wooden floor. Outside, the waves murmured like the steady breath of a world I had built, not from fantasy, but from hours of work, lines of code, and countless unseen failures. I threw on a light robe and stepped onto the terrace with a hot cup of coffee. In front of me, the island was waking up. Staff were setting up breakfast outdoors, the smell of toast wafting through the air, tables lined neatly beneath swaying palms. In the distance, I saw Madison walking with Mom, and Daniel sitting alone at a stone table, holding his iPad, eyes focused as if studying something deeply. Everything felt calm, and to me, this was the true feeling of success. Not the applause, not the overdue praise, not even the staggering numbers, but the freedom to live in what you believe without having to justify it or ask anyone's permission. I thought back on the road I'd traveled, The early days with nothing but an old laptop in a cramped apartment, the sleepless nights tweaking code and pixel placement to match emotion, the times I turned down help that everyone thought I was foolish to refuse. I had stayed silent when they called me a failure. But in that silence, I never stopped building. I didn't create this empire out of revenge or to prove a point. I created it because I had to. Because not doing it would mean losing who I was. Each of us has a dream the world may not understand, but no one owes the world understanding from the start. The truth is, great things often begin in solitude. When no one's cheering you on, no one's standing beside you, and every door seems closed. And in that moment, if you keep going, if you dare to believe in the unseen, if you keep laying brick after brick in silence, one day, the world will have no choice but to see. Breakfast unfolded in a gentle atmosphere. People began talking to me with a different look in their eyes. Not guarded or dismissive anymore. This time, it was genuine curiosity and, for the first time, respect. Daniel asked about Ethereum's operational model. Madison brought up potential collaboration with her company's marketing division. Even my father, who had always kept his distance, invited me to join an international finance forum next month, where he would be a keynote speaker. I didn't rush to accept. I smiled, nodded, and simply said, "I'll think about it." Because for the first time, I had the right to choose, instead of hoping to be chosen. After breakfast, I joined Amanda, my assistant and newly appointed COO of Lumina Frame, to check the west side of the island, where I planned to build the first digital art center combining physical space and extended reality technology. Amanda handed me a tablet showing the number of new users signed up since yesterday's project launch, nearly 1 million in under 24 hours. I smiled, not because of the number, but because I knew this wasn't the peak. It was just the beginning of an entirely new chapter. And I would move forward, no longer hiding. That night, I returned alone to the auditorium where I had once played the timeline of my success. I stood in the empty room and replayed an old video. A clip of myself at 23, eyes burning with conviction, presenting to no one, just an old webcam recording. I let it run to the end, then looked at my younger self on the screen. That girl had nothing but belief. No assets, no fame, no one who believed in her. But she didn't quit. I smiled. "You did it, Olivia," I whispered. "And this is only chapter 1. I turned and stepped outside, into the ink-black night sky scattered with 1 million shining stars. Beneath my feet was an island, the symbol of a dream once ridiculed. In front of me was the future, with no beaten path, only one I would carve myself. Because real success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about believing you're right, and living fully in that belief, to the very end. I was once dismissed, left out of every conversation about success because I chose a path no one believed in. But in that silence, I built an empire. And now, I don't need applause or late recognition. I just need to know I believed in myself and never gave up. Success doesn't come from fanfare. It comes from staying true even when the world turns away. What do you think about Olivia's journey and how she chose to face her family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring family stories just like this one. My name is Stella Whitman. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. The youngest child in a conservative 3-generation real estate family, I knew early on that my place was never meant to be at the boardroom table. Everything in our home revolved around my father, Mr. Lawrence Whitman, who believed the family name was our greatest asset. And me? I was just the only daughter, born to marry someone suitable, have children, and stay quiet. Brandon and Miles, my much older brothers, were the family's pride. By high school, they were already being brought to business conferences and cocktail events to get familiar with the trade. Me? I was told to stay home, learn how to cook, and master being a proper lady. I started coding when I was 13, using an old computer gifted by a teacher. I stayed up countless nights learning Python, then Java, eventually building my first small program by the time I was 15. I remember the exact moment I nervously handed my father a USB drive with a personal finance tool I'd built just for his company. He looked at it for a few seconds, then tossed it on the table. "Machines aren't for girls. Studying like that is just wasting your youth." I was speechless, but I didn't stop. By 17, I earned a full scholarship to a summer coding program in San Francisco. I was so happy I nearly cried when I opened the acceptance letter. But when I handed it to my parents, my father's face hardened. "No daughter of mine is traveling alone. You'll stay home and start preparing for the engagement dinner. The Carter family just made an offer." I remember shaking with anger. "Not marrying anyone. I want to study. I want to become a software engineer." That was when his expression shifted. No more anger, just deep disappointment. "You're no longer worthy of this name." That night, I went back to my room and quietly packed a backpack. I brought my laptop, a change of clothes, and an old notebook filled with my first lines of code. I left the house just before midnight. No one came to see me off. No hug, no parting words. I slept curled up on a bench at a bus station that night. Then took the cheapest ticket I could find to San Francisco. I didn't have much money, but I had passion, stubbornness, and wounds deep enough that I had nothing left to lose. For years after, I did everything I could to survive. Tutoring, waiting tables, building cheap freelance apps just to pay rent and keep learning. I taught myself from secondhand books and free online courses, then earned global certifications one by one. 10 years later, I became the founder and CEO of Linxa Systems, an artificial intelligence startup that had just closed a Series C round at $185 million. But even when I was honored at a global tech summit, hailed by the media as a disruptive tech icon, my parents never once called me, as if I'd never existed. That's fine. I learned to extract value from being forgotten. Every line of code I wrote was a silent message: "I'm worth it, even if you don't see it." I don't know what made my mother call me again after 15 years of silence. Maybe it was the Forbes article last month. Stella Whitman, the woman rewriting the rules of AI. Or maybe it was the photo of me standing beside the Secretary of Education, signing a new STEM scholarship program for girls. Or maybe they were sinking. The fourth time she called in 3 days, I finally answered, not out of curiosity, but because I wanted to hear the voice of the woman who stood by while I was pushed out into a snowstorm that night. "Stella, it's Mom." "Yes," I answered, like I was finalizing a contract. She took a long breath. "Your father, he wants to see you." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, really? After 15 years, he suddenly remembers he has a daughter? It's not what you think." I cut her off. "His company's crashing. I saw the internal reports. 2 consecutive quarters in the red. The Urban Loop project shut down. The largest shareholder just pulled out. Am I wrong?" She was silent. But that silence said everything. I turned my chair toward the window. The city lights still shone, but something inside me, something old, had long since gone cold. "He wants to meet? For what?" "There's a family dinner this Friday. He wants everyone there. To talk, to start fresh." I didn't need to ask to know what that invitation really meant. Start fresh? Or patch the ruins? She hesitated. "Stella, he won't admit it, but I know. You're the only chance left. If you could just help a little. Just, no more just." I cut in coldly, like I was declining a weak investment pitch. A long silence followed. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." I looked up, surprised, but kept my face unreadable. "Send me the address. I'll think about it." After the call, I sat still for a moment, fingers tracing the edge of my walnut desk. Beneath the glass was a photo of my first all-female engineering team. 4 young women, their eyes lit up with belief. Not one of them came from a traditional family. I buzzed Elena, my senior assistant. Clear my schedule for Friday night, book a private room at Maison Lucienne, and contact Jasper and PR. I want a family reunion script, something just subtle enough for the media to latch onto. Stella, are you really going? I'm not just attending, I'm directing the entire show now. That night, I opened the old wooden box in the corner of my closet. Inside were things I'd never thrown away. My first scholarship letter, a photo of the computer I'd built myself, and a sketch of the first software I ever designed. I picked up an old picture of me as a child, smiling brightly, holding up a basic circuit board. Next to me, Brandon held a sports trophy, our father's hand proudly on his shoulder. Me, I wasn't even being looked at. I exhaled slowly. This time, he'll have no choice but to see me. I texted Jasper. Subject: daughter returns. Brilliant female CEO reunites with traditional family after 15 years apart. But behind the scenes, a story the press has never heard. Low-key setup. Just enough for the press to sniff. Then I drafted an email to my mother. Friday evening. Not the old place. We'll meet at Maison Lucienne, 8 p.m. sharp. Dad, Brandon, and Miles are all invited. I've arranged everything. And tell them to dress properly. The media tends to notice details. Nothing about this return was accidental. I wasn't coming back to hear an apology. I was coming back to reset the board. And now, I was the one holding every piece. Maison Lucienne, rooftop level, crystal lights cascaded over each glass of Dom Perignon I had just ordered. The private glass room was fully soundproof, booked 3 days in advance, with strict security clearance. I arrived 10 minutes early. My outfit: a deep navy silk dress, clean lines, high neckline. It was a choice both modest and powerful. No one in my family had ever seen me like this, and tonight, they wouldn't forget it. My father arrived first, just as I expected. Lawrence Whitman had never been late for a meeting in his life. Even with his company plummeting, he showed up in a tailored gray suit and polished leather shoes. Stella. Mr. Lawrence. I didn't shake his hand. He paused awkwardly, then sat down without protest. My mother arrived next, quietly, avoiding direct eye contact. Her hair was now streaked with silver, but the burgundy dress she wore still hinted at the role she clung to. The woman behind the successful man. I had no intention of shattering that image. She could dismantle it herself. Brandon and Miles arrived last, 3 minutes late, still carrying that self-important air. Despite the frayed hem on Brandon's suit and the worn-down heels on Miles's shoes. I smirked when they glanced around and saw me at the head of the table. I pointed to their seats, already assigned. Please, sit. Once everyone settled in, I raised my hand. The server stepped in and poured champagne. I lightly tapped my glass and spoke just loud enough. The family reunions. Though I doubt any of you expected one under circumstances like these. My father growled. What kind of family talk do you think this is? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out an iPad and swiped across the screen. Charts and data appeared. Negative cash flow, lawsuits pending, suspicious pension fund activity. I slid the iPad to the center of the table. This is the real reason we're here. And I know it better than any of you. Brandon frowned. Who gave you the right? I don't need permission to investigate things that affect my family's name. I looked directly at my father. Did you know your company's stock is about to be delisted? The board has already scheduled a quiet vote to remove you. And I know exactly who they're nominating. He gripped the armrest. My mother covered her mouth, visibly pale. I'm not reclaiming the Whitman name, but I can save it, on my terms. Miles interjected. Stella, you're acting like this all revolves around you. I turned to him, smiling without a trace of warmth. It does revolve around me, and if any of you want to survive this transition, you'll each play the role I assign. I pulled out a packet of printed documents. Responsibility assignments, placing one in front of each of them. In 1 month, I'm hosting a gala. Women Forward, advancing women in tech. Every major media outlet will be there. And the Whitman family, you, people, will be front and center. My father's voice dropped. What? You'll deliver the opening speech. You'll talk about realizing the brilliance of your daughter and your journey from tradition to transformation. I've already hired the speechwriter. You just need to rehearse. I'm not doing that. Refuse. And next week the shareholders will receive a full report on 3 of your financial violations tied to Urban Loop. I have copies of all 3. I turned to Brandon. You'll announce a STEM initiative for girls under the name Whitman Tech Future. I've already secured co-sponsorship from the Hightower Foundation. Decline, and I'll have independent auditors revisit the representation expenses you claimed at the Boston branch. Brandon flushed but said nothing. And Mom, I looked at her directly. You'll be the face of a scholarship program for young women of color pursuing programming. It will be named the Eleanor Fund. Because I still want your name attached to something good. My mother began to cry. But she didn't look away. I stood slowly. Tonight isn't an offer. It's an ultimatum. If you agree, I'll help you survive the coming shift. If you refuse, check the headlines tomorrow morning. I picked up my clutch, ready to leave, but turned back with one last line. And smile beautifully when the cameras turn your way. Because starting now, you'll be playing the role of a progressive, inclusive family. Before I choose to play the role of the one who ends it all. 3 days after that dinner at Maison Lucienne, I received an email from our internal PR team. Brandon Whitman is scheduled to appear on the Inside Legacy talk show to discuss the STEM initiative for girls, which he will represent. I frowned. Brandon was never one to enjoy being on camera, much less someone who apologized in public. I clicked the video link. The studio appeared on screen. Soft lighting, cool blue backdrop, the Women Forward logo in the corner. Brandon sat upright, hands neatly folded on his lap. The host asked, "Is there anything you'd like to share with the public, especially with your sister?" Brandon paused for a second, then lowered his head, exhaled slowly. I used to think women didn't belong in tech. That's what my father taught me. And I was foolish enough to believe siblings didn't need to protect each other, as long as I held my place. He looked up, voice cracking slightly. But Stella isn't just my sister. She's the only person in this family who had the courage to confront our mistakes, and I'm sorry. My face flushed, not from emotion but shock. Brandon, the same man who once mocked me for coding for fun when I got my scholarship, was now crying on national television. I didn't even have time to react before my phone buzzed. Mom. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. Stella, can we meet for a moment? Somewhere near your office. Just 10 minutes. A small cafe, just 5 minutes walk from the Linksa building. She was already sitting in the corner, holding a full cup of latte. No makeup, no earrings, and eyes that couldn't hide the redness. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and kept just enough distance. I don't have much time. I know. She placed a thin, worn file folder on the table. These are things I've kept for more than a decade. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were printouts from tech blogs, photos of me at early conferences, articles from the year I won the Women in Innovation Award, event invitations, even a French write-up about the AI version I'd developed in Europe. Some pages were folded, a few smudged as if touched by water. I never knew how to talk to you. She looked at me, her voice trembling. After you left? Every time your name appeared in the news, I'd cut it out, print it, and save it here. Every time your father growled, "She no longer exists to this family," I'd quietly open this file and read every word. I stayed silent, though a tightness pulled at my chest. If you'll let me, I want to do this for real, not for show, not for your father, but because I know I turned my back on the one child who had the courage to live with truth. I met her eyes. Eyes that, after all these years, finally didn't turn away. You've never needed me. And that's exactly why you have every reason to question this. I know. But you're no longer that 17-year-old girl. And I'm no longer the woman who nodded every time your father said, "She's wrong." "What exactly do you want to do?" I asked. She pulled out another sheet of paper. "It's an application form to become an executive advisor for the Eleanor Fund. I want to manage the scholarship myself, to meet the girls, hear their stories, and use my voice to support them as they enter a world you once had to break into alone." I gave a slight nod. "If you mess this up, the public will expose everything within 24 hours. Are you ready for that?" I'm no longer afraid of judgment. I'm only afraid of not doing the right thing before it's too late. I didn't hug her. I didn't cry. But for the first time, I felt I wasn't the only one fighting on this battlefield anymore. That evening, I sat in my office, looking out over the city, replaying the interview clip of Brandon. This time I listened not to verify his emotions, but because I wanted to believe that something real might be changing. A message from Mom popped up. "Can you take me to the scholarship center tomorrow to meet the girls? I want to get started early." I looked down at my hand on the desk. Steady, but no longer cold. I typed back one word. Yes. The Women Forward Gala kicked off at 8 p.m. at the Metropolitan Grand Hall in the heart of Manhattan. I stood backstage, peering through the velvet curtain as the seats filled up. Tech investors, media, education leaders, and the young women selected for the inaugural scholarship cohort. I wore a sleek, off-shoulder black gown. Simple, but every metallic thread caught the light just right. I didn't need jewelry, my name already gleamed on its own. "Your family's here," Elena whispered beside me. "And Mr. Lawrence looks a little out of place." I wasn't surprised. My father had never stood in front of a crowd to apologize, but tonight he had agreed. Not because I forced him, at least I wanted to believe that, but because he'd started to understand. I stepped onto the stage to applause. Behind me, the giant LED screen lit up with the words, "Women Who Lead the Future." I held the mic, my gaze unwavering. 15 years ago, I was told that technology wasn't for girls, that women should step aside and support men in chasing success. But today, I'd like to rewrite that script. I turned. The screen shifted to a slideshow of 20 outstanding female students. Each one a story, a dream. These are pioneers, and each of them will receive a full scholarship from the Eleanor Fund to study, research, and create without limitation. Applause broke out across the hall. I spotted my mother rising to her feet, her eyes misty with pride. Beside her, Brandon, now Chief Operating Officer, was whispering something to a familiar investor. I drew a deep breath and looked toward my father. "Or we continue. There's someone else who wants to share a few words." I invited him to the stage. He walked slowly, but with steadiness. Under the lights, the silver in his hair shimmered like a reflection of all the years spent in rigid tradition. He took the mic and paused. The room fell silent. "I'm Lawrence Whitman, and I was wrong." A ripple moved through the crowd. He continued. "Wrong to believe success came in only one shape. Wrong not to recognize that my daughter, Stella, saw the future long before the rest of us did." He looked at me, then out to the audience. "I'm voluntarily stepping down as chairman of Whitman Holdings, transferring full leadership to Stella, not because she's my daughter, but because she's the most capable person for the job." This time, the applause surged like a wave. The screen behind us lit up with a collage. Images from my early startup days, alongside faces of young women now studying engineering across the U.S. After his speech, my mother joined the stage with two of the first Eleanor Fund students, introducing a new mentorship program and immersive tech internships. She didn't read from notes. Every word came from the heart. From the wings, I watched Brandon shake hands with a Japanese sponsor. Miles, the same man who once called STEM child's play, was exchanging contacts with a group of student founders working on a public health app. He had started backing social projects through his new initiative, Whitman for Impact. For the first time, my entire family wasn't performing. They were doing the work. The next morning, my father's speech video surpassed 10 million views. The Wall Street Journal headline read, "From Control to Change, the Whitman Family and a Transformation That Redefined Women in Tech." I sat in my office, still wearing the white shirt from the night before, eyes sleepless, but strangely at peace inside. "How do you feel?" Elena walked in, holding a cup of coffee. "For the first time in my life, I don't feel like I need to prove anything to my family. And the media's calling it a historic transfer of legacy." I smiled. "I don't need legacy. I just want to build a world where no girl is ever told she doesn't belong again." On my desk, a new email popped up. The sender, UN Women Tech Division. Subject, Invitation for Stella Whitman to serve as a global advisor for women in tech programs. I leaned back in my chair. Right then, a message from Mom appeared. "Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with the new scholarship students. Can you drop by? I'd love for you to share your journey." I typed back a single word. "Absolutely." 3 weeks after the gala, I was invited to speak at the International Tech Conference, TechVerse 2030 in Berlin. Theme, Transformative Leadership. When Women Redefine Power. I declined the traditional keynote format. Instead, I invited Sophie Tran, one of the Eleanor Fund scholars, to share the stage with me. She was only 19, but had already made waves in the coding community by building an AI platform that detects gender bias in digital language, from workplace emails to product ads. "I call it Verity Protocol," she said. "But my friends, they call it Stella Check." The room chuckled softly. I stood beside her, heart skipping a beat. Sophie demonstrated the software interface. On screen, email phrases like "professional like a man" or "a strong masculine solution" were highlighted in red, with neutral, inclusive alternatives suggested. "It's not that we're weak and need protection," she explained. "It's that unconscious bias has been treated as normal for far too long. It's time to reprogram the language of tech itself." The applause lasted almost 2 full minutes. 2 days later, 3 major U.S. tech corporations sent official confirmations. They would integrate Stella Check into all internal communication systems. A week after that, Samsung AI Lab proposed a partnership to develop a multilingual international version. And by the end of the month, the United Nations Technology Commission announced that Stella Check would serve as the global reference standard for AI projects involving human interaction. Headlines flooded every major publication, from Disowned Daughter to Woman Rewriting the Power Structure of Tech. Verity Protocol ushers in a new era of equitable code. I read the headlines from the top floor of Linksa, but I no longer felt the rush or the tears I used to. Because now I understood. This was no longer just my story. That Friday afternoon, I visited the lab at Linksa headquarters. The room was bright, packed with desks and buzzing with energy. New Eleanor Fund recipients testing the beta version of Stella Check 2 together. "Stella," Sophie called, waving me over. "I want to show you the social media test run." I'll never sleep with them. I sat beside her. On the screen was a flagged chat where an AI caught a suggestion that a female employee should soften her tone to keep the team stable. The neutral rewrite next to it read, "Encourage emotional regulation in a diverse environment." I think version 2 can help startups reshape company culture from the ground up. I looked at Sophie, remembering myself at 17, laptop in hand, full of dreams, yet shut out behind closed doors. You know, if I'd had a tool like this back then, maybe I wouldn't have had to leave home that snowy night. Sophie smiled. But if you hadn't left, I, and thousands of others, wouldn't be here. The next morning, I received an invitation from the Davos Forum. Stella Whitman, guest of honor. Topic, Restructuring Gender Leadership in the Digital Age. At the same time, my mother sent me a photo from a classroom in Detroit. She had just hosted a workshop on women's rights and basic coding with a group of ninth grade students. She stood in the center, hair loose, no makeup, eyes radiant. Brandon was in Singapore, working with Sophie's team to implement StellaCheck at our new branch. Miles had just updated me. He was leading a new program funding coding tuition for formerly incarcerated women. I laughed to myself, not because of their transformation, but because I realized something. I was no longer alone in this revolution. I stood backstage at the Global Women Forward 2040 Gala, held for the first time at Seattle's iconic Dome venue. Once a symbol of exclusion in tech, now reborn to honor those who were once pushed aside. In front of me, over 2,000 guests sat in person. Millions more watched online. In the front row, my mother sat between two students from Nigeria and Argentina. Brandon was guiding scholarship mentors into small groups. Miles had just arrived with a volunteer team from Detroit, introducing an app to help women re-enter society after prison. My family, once the ones who shut me out, were now the ones opening doors. Not in name, in action. Soft music played, signaling it was my turn. I stepped onto the center of the stage, white light gently washing over me. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. I smiled and took the mic. Not long ago, I thought I only had two choices, revenge or forgetting. I paused, letting the silence settle. But it turns out, there's a third path. One where we don't let the past weigh us down, but instead use it as a foundation. That path is change. Behind me, the giant screen displayed images of female students from over 30 countries, learning, coding, managing, teaching, and inspiring. I was once called the lost daughter, cast out of the very house I grew up in. And for years, I carried a kind of anger I couldn't name. But if I had used that anger to destroy, I would have only repeated the same cycle I once suffered through. I looked toward my mother. She was wiping away tears but smiling with quiet pride. So I chose something else. I chose to build. The room was completely still. I drew in a deep breath. And today, I want to say this. Revenge might start a story, but it's transformation, persistence, and compassion that have the power to end it. With a better future. Applause began, hesitant at first, then rising. This year's gala isn't just an event, it's a milestone, a reminder that we don't need permission to take up space. We just need to choose the right moment, to step forward and step forward together. The screen behind me shifted to a new logo, Stella Next, leading tech with purpose. My team and I will personally mentor 100 young women each year from all over the world to become the next generation of tech leaders. Not just skilled in software, but also in empathy. Not just programmers, but community designers. I extended my hand toward the audience. And I'm not doing this alone. My mother walked onto the stage, hand in hand with Sophie and two scholarship students from Chile and Morocco. Brandon and Miles followed. My entire family stood beside me. This time not for show. They had chosen to stay, to change with me. Together we raised our hands to greet the crowd. The lights dimmed gently. The entire room rose in applause. There were no more victims in this story. Only people choosing to build a new future. That night, I stayed late in my small office on the 21st floor of Linksa. It wasn't as luxurious as the penthouse I once used, but I liked it more, because it was quiet and had a view of the night sky. On the desk was a letter I'd written to myself at 17. I had once planned to send it as a declaration of war. Now, I simply turned it over, picked up a pen, and wrote, "We didn't get revenge. We led the way. We didn't repeat the pain. We redefined the legacy. And most importantly, we made sure no girl ever has to stand alone again." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer next to a fresh stack of blank paper. Tomorrow, I would begin writing a new chapter, not one of pain, but of spreading hope. Because instead of using the past to change the future, I'd learn to use it to clear the path forward. Stella Whitman's story isn't just about overcoming rejection and injustice. It's a powerful reminder that big change often begins with small acts of courage. From a girl cast out of her home for loving technology, Stella became a global symbol of transformation and purpose-driven leadership. In the real world, those who've been pushed to the margins can absolutely become the ones who reshape the system, if they're willing to rise, to learn, and to choose to build instead of break. What do you think about Stella's journey and the transformation of her family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, family, and the quiet revolutions happening all around us.